Let's talk about geographic coordinates, which is how we know where we are on the surface of the Earth. The way that we do this is with these coordinates that we call latitude and longitude, and both of those are measures of angles. So let's start with latitude. Latitude tells us how far north or south we are on the surface of the Earth. So the equator would have a latitude value of 0, shown here. The North Pole would have a latitude value of plus 90 degrees or 90 degrees north. And the South Pole, which is not shown here, would have a latitude value of 90 degrees south or minus 90 degrees. The example shown here, this dashed line on the globe, it's a latitude of 49 degrees north. And we can see it's an angular measurement. They're measuring it by how big of an angle it is between the plane that would cut through the equator and this line that's shown here at 49 degrees. So it's not a measure of distance, it's a measure of angles, and we can put all of those lines on a map, like on a globe like this, and we can see that it runs from 0 to 90 north, 0 to minus 90 or 90 degrees south. And these lines are sometimes called parallels because they never intersect each other. So latitude, lines of latitude, and lines of parallels both mean the same things when we talk about geographic coordinates on a globe. And so just to kind of look at it completely from the side, we would have latitudes positive to the north of the equator, negative to the south of the equator, or we could say north. We could say this is 30 degrees north or plus 30 degrees, 30 degrees or 60 degrees north or plus 60 degrees. And for south, we typically put a minus sign. So this minus sign here would be minus 30 and minus 60 degrees. So there's some famous lines of latitude that all have to do with the Earth having a tilt on its axis of 23.5 degrees. So the equator, once again, is the line of 0. You may have heard of these two tropic lines, the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. The Tropic of Cancer is in the northern hemisphere. The Tropic of Capricorn is in the southern hemisphere. Those are 23 degrees north and 23 degrees south of the equator, respectively. And we'll see why we call out those lines here in a minute. The other two famous lines of latitude that we sometimes talk about is the Arctic Circle to the north and the Antarctic Circle to the south. And you can see these are not 23.5, but they're 66.5, which is 23.5 degrees from 90 degrees. So if we took 66.5, added 23.5 degrees, we would get to 90 degrees. So they're just 23.5 degrees from the North Pole and the South Pole. So why are these lines so famous, and what do they mean? So this shows the summer solstice. So the Earth is tilting on its axis by 23.5 degrees. So on this certain day in the summer, as the Earth is rotating around and the axis of the Earth is kind of pointing to some point above where the sun would be, we can see that the northern hemisphere is really getting more direct sunshine. And that's what's shown here. We're showing the sun's rays as parallel lines because the sun is very far from the Earth. So that's a pretty good approximation. And we can see on this day, the sun's rays at noon would be shining directly down. The place right under the sun's rays would be this line, the Tropic of Cancer, at 23.5 degrees north. So the midday sun would be directly overhead on this day, only once a year on the summer solstice. So that's why the Tropic of Cancer is famous. The Tropic of Capricorn, that happens on the winter solstice. The sun is shining directly down on the 23.5 degree line of latitude on that day. The other line here, the Arctic Circle, on the longest day of the year, on the summer solstice, that's where every place at the Arctic Circle and above would receive 24 hours of daylight. The sun would never set. It would dip down, touch the horizon, and then start back up again. So these lines of latitude are just related to how the Earth revolves around the sun and some special cases there. This is different than on the equinoxes. So on the equinox, the axis of the Earth is is perpendicular to the rays of the light coming in. So this means that on 2 days of the year, the autumn equinox and the vernal equinox or the spring equinox, the lines from the sun are perpendicular to the equator, and every place on the earth is getting exactly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime. Only happens 2 days a year, and those are the 2 days when all things are equal. So these geographic coordinates, the lines of longitude are more complicated. So the lines of longitude, there is no natural line of 0 degrees for longitude. So for latitude, the natural line of 0 degrees is the equator because it's halfway between the North Pole and the South Pole and perpendicular to the Earth's rotational axis. But there is no 0 line of longitude. So we just decided on one. It runs through Greenwich, England, and we called this one 0 degrees longitude. But we still measure it as an angle. So if we were measuring 60 degrees away from that, from the line of 0 longitude, then we would have a line that cuts through the Earth like this. We can see that while latitude varied from 0 to 90, this one varies from 0 to 180 degrees east, and also from 0 to 180 degrees west. So this changes by 360 degrees, whereas latitude only changes by 180 degrees. And that's showing some of these lines here. We also call these lines meridians. So we can also call lines of longitude meridians. And just to, they kind of look like wedges of an orange, right? They all cut through the middle. There's the navel of the orange, and all these little wedges are cutting through because they're just being measured from the center of the Earth along the outside of the Earth there. One thing to note about lines of longitude is they all converge at the North Pole. They all converge at the South Pole. So even though these lines of longitude are 1 degree apart, we can see that if we measured how long the line of latitude was between these lines of longitude, here it would be 111.32 kilometers. At 40 degrees north, it would be down to 85.4 kilometers. And right at the North Pole, those two lines of longitude touch each other, they cross each other, so there would be no distance of latitude right at the North Pole. So just to kind of summarize, there's a 0 degree line of longitude. It runs through Greenwich, England. Sometimes it's called the prime meridian. We start measuring angles away from that prime meridian, and we get these different numbers, 30, 60, 90 degrees east. And those are the positive ones in this case. So those are the ones that we say are positive. That was also arbitrary, right? There's no reason to make that positive or negative. Moving in this direction, same numbering system, except now they're negative, or we would refer to them as 30, 60, 90 degrees west. They both meet at 180 degrees. 180 degrees east is the same as 180 degrees west. It's on the opposite side of the Earth from Greenwich, England, and that accounts for the 360 degrees of longitude. And just to kind of place ourselves in all of this, the United States, we can see that most of the United States lies between 45 degrees north near its northern border and 30 degrees north, although some things like Florida and Texas extend beyond that. And then for longitude, the values run between maybe 65 degrees to the west, and like 125 degrees or so to the west for the continental United States. So we're kind of in that zone when we talk about latitude and longitude.